The next item is a public hearing. It deals with Conditional Use Permit 164, revocation of CUP 164. Mr. Director.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. Mr. Moe will be presenting this item tonight.
Pull it up close to you.
So on April 2nd, 1996, the Planning Commission adopted resolution number PC 96-16, approving conditional use permit 164 to install and operate a recycling facility behind the Ponderosa Shopping Center. The recycling facility was to include 2 8x21-foot storage containers and occupy 2 parking spaces. On March 1st, 2012, Karen and Pogos Marinian purchased the facility and have operated the business as Zach Incorporated. So here's a location map of the site. So you can, here's the Ponderosa Shopping Center, here's Arneill Road, Pickwick Drive here, here's the fire station, the post office, the 99-cent store here, and then Smart and Final located right here. This is a zoomed in aerial of over the site. As you can see here, the 2 storage containers. You have storage, outdoor storage here, an unpermitted tarp, some storage out here, and then you can see here there's more bags of storage here, and it actually has spilled over onto the adjoining property. And then also you can see here the staining on the asphalt. So conditional use permit 164 has 27 general and special conditions of approval crafted to protect the health and safety and general welfare of the community. And just to kind of summarize all 27 conditions, the CUP was only valid for 5 years. Any changes to the facility must be approved by the city. No outdoor storage, sales, or display are allowed. The use must comply with a CPD zone. It must be maintained in a clean and free of debris. It must be appurtenant to a grocery store and constructed with durable, waterproof, and rust-proof fixed to the site materials. So after receiving a complaint in August, staff went out and verified the conditions of the recycling facility. And on September 16th, the staff sent the owner a notice of violation regarding the following violations of the condition of approval. For outdoor storage, graffiti, trash and debris, poorly maintained and rusted storage containers, non-permitted tarp and structure, and dumping liquids on the pavement. So here's a picture that when we went out and documented in August 26, 2015. As you can see right here, this is the stream that's going down into the storm drain from liquids being dumped onto the asphalt. You can see the outdoor storage here. This is the non-permitted tarp, which is attached to the utility pole here, and a pole here that was installed into the asphalt. And then it's also attached to was attached to the structure here. So here's behind the facility. So you can kind of see, there's graffiti here. There's another non-permitted tarp, and then some trash and debris. So this is just a little bit further down on the side. You can see the storage here and the storage here. So on September 26th, staff sat down and met with the owner and kind of went over all the violations of condition approval and explained what needed to be done to bring the property back into compliance. At that time, the owner stated that he was not aware of the violations and said he would abate them within 2 days. So, and also during that meeting, the owner requested staff to not send any more written notices of violation and call them directly so they can quickly handle any future violations, which staff did agree to. So here's a picture of the facility the day after a meeting, which shows an improvement. So as I just mentioned, staff didn't notice initially that the property was in compliance, and then kind of slowly was maintained in the morning, but by the afternoon it was kind of starting to slip a little bit, but then it was cleaned again in the morning. And however, after 10 days, the recycling facility slipped back into violation, and a violation of the conditions of approval. So staff went ahead and called the owner per his request on October 13th and verbally provided him with a second notice of violation. And during that conversation, the owner was informed that any future violations could result in citations and possible revoking his CUP. So the owner agreed to abate the violations at that time. So this is 10 days after our phone call. You can see there's still storage out of the facility. And here's in November. So you have storage here, and you can kind of see it in the back. December, more storage here. We have spray paint on the container. So as staff realized we weren't going to receive voluntary compliance with this case, we started to sit down and really analyze and put together a case for future notices violation and possible issuing citations. And in our analysis, we discovered that the CUP was expired. So really what that did is it forced us to kind of stop and, regroup and see how we're going to proceed, forward. We came up with 3 options. The first option was, since the CUP was expired, would terminate the use immediately. And then the second option was to continue to move down the violations of the condition of approval and issue notices and citations and bring it back into compliance there, but would be issuing violations on an expired permit. And the third option was to go through the formal process of revoking the permit, which requires a public hearing and eventually led us to the meeting here tonight. So we decided to go ahead with option 3 for several reasons. One, we wanted to also bring in the community to give them an opportunity if they want to voice any concerns, allow the business owner to voice his concerns, and then also because the significant amount of time since the permit has expired. So staff continued to monitor the property, and we included pictures in the staff report of the property, and they continued to show signs that it was in violation of the conditions of approval. And then on May 3rd, 2016, staff was out there doing a reinspection and was accosted by a homeless individual. And due to safety concerns, from that point on, we did all our inspections and documentations from inside the vehicle, and only if we had to go out and talk with the employees there or get out of the vehicles, we brought the Sheriff's Department with us. So here's the current condition of the facility. This picture was taken at the end of July, so you can see there's a lot of outdoor storage here, spray paint on the container, and spray paint over here. So here's a side shot of on the same day, so you can see how much storage is out in front of the container now. And this sign obviously doesn't meet our sign ordinance. So this is the picture of the facility yesterday. So we still have storage outside of the container here and here. I kind of want to direct your attention to these 2 bottles right here on the ground. Oops. And zooming in on them. So that's a Crystal Geyser water bottle, so with unknown substance in it. This is the facility about an hour ago. So close up for business, and you can still see there's still outdoor storage, and it doesn't meet our standard for Camarillo. So in addition to the expired permit and the violations of the conditions of approval, staff also believes that the facility is operation is detrimental to the public safety and health of Camarillo. So we reached out to the police department to get their input and their experience on with the recycling facility, and they responded that they've received over 100 incidents that are linked directly or indirectly to this recycling facility. So, and I'm just going to show you. I'm not going to say all the items on the list here, but you can see all the items that they've been addressing. So, and also the police department has provided 2 written memorandums supporting the conditional use permit to be revoked. One on January 13th, which basically encompasses all the list of items that on the previous slide. And then also on May 3rd, 2016, where the police department documented criminal activity concerning lewd conduct with children at the recycling facility. And to kind of describe more of the police involvement at the recycling facility, we have Sergeant John Franchi with the Camarillo Police Department. John.
Good evening. I've been working here in Camarillo since 2006, and up until about 4 years ago, we never had any issues in that area. Now it's become one of the worst parts of town for homeless camps, and a lot of them congregate at the recycling center. Several of them have worked there, which encourages them there to stay. They urinate around there. They live there. We've had several drug arrests there. I myself have cited some people for alcohol violations there directly related to the recycling center. And as recently as April 26th, the manager of the recycling center was arrested for several counts of lewd conduct with a minor there that he met at the location. And he was 69 years old and the minor was 15. We already had serious concerns with all the criminal activity going on there. And this has kind of put it over the top where the person in charge of that center was engaging in lewd conduct with a minor. In addition, because of all the issues we've had there, we've had to craft new ordinances in the city to try to filter people out, provide them services, and get them the help that they need. Some accept it, some don't. But that seems to be the center there for people to hang out at the recycling center. And some of the other issues, when we first started looking at it, they collect certain things there too that we don't accept here in Ventura County for recycling. And that may be reasons why there are other issues, why there's so much stuff there, but it is always a mess at the location. Over the last few years, I've sent photos myself. So we feel in the public's best interest, and there's also some Facebook things that came out from people that talked about how dirty it is and how people urinate there. We don't think it's safe for the public to have this recycling center there. We have a few others in town. They're enclosed recycling centers where people can go in and put shoes and different things in. This is the only one of the type, and it is just a mess. So if there's any questions I can answer for any of you, I'd be more than happy to do so at this time.
Any questions of Sergeant Franchi? Mr. Edsel.
You know, there's a recycling center behind Bonds in Mission Oaks.
Yes.
That's different operators, I think, but what's the comparison of calls you have there? Do you get any calls there?
Zero.
Zero.
We've never had one call there since I've been here, since 2006. Mm-hmm. There's another one behind, up on Arneill, behind the old Albertsons. Mm-hmm. Never had one call for service there. Mm-hmm. Not one problem ever.
That's gone now. It's not there.
What's that?
It's not there anymore.
Yeah, it was there this up until about, I think, a year ago. Mm-hmm. But it had been there for several years, never any problems.
Right.
Same type of thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Hemmons?
I have a question of staff.
Sure, go ahead.
I guess my overriding question is,
Just one moment, point of order, please, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Moe was still
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead.
a few
of that.
slides away from finishing.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the Camarillo Municipal Code, Section 19.62.170, does authorize the Planning Commission to revoke a conditional use permit if it finds one of the following to be true. So the number one, the CUP was obtained by fraud, which doesn't apply here. Two, where the use is ceased by voluntary actions, which it's still operational, so that one doesn't apply. Number three, the conditional use permit granted is being or has been exercised contrary to any conditions of approval or in violation of any law. So we think this one really applies based on the expired permit, the violations of conditional approval, and the criminal activity at the location. And then also four, the use for which the approval was granted is being exercised as to be detrimental to the public health or safety, or as to constitute a public nuisance. So we also think number four applies to, based on the report from Sergeant Franchi. So staff's recommendation is to revoke conditional use permit 164 due to the expiration of the permit, the violations, the condition approval, and the public health and safety conditions that require police intervention at this facility. So that concludes my staff report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff at this time?
I do with number 4 that was up there, or I'm sorry, number 2, that it said that it would cease to exist if it was voluntarily abandoned. Isn't that in effect what they did when they didn't renew it after 5 years? Didn't they, in essence, abandon their CPU?
They didn't abandon the operation. That's what it's applying to, the operation of the facility. But by not renewing or applying for a new extension for the conditional use permit, that was a condition of approval. So that would be a violation of that.
I probably should have said, to me, it seems like it doesn't exist because it would be null and void.
Right, and that's kind of where we came to the crossroads, where we had to stop and kind of analyze how we're going to proceed with that. So, do we pursue the revoking the permit, or do we go with just ceasing the use immediately because the permit doesn't exist, or do we go with issuing violations to a permit that's already expired? So that's why we brought it. We went through the formal process of revoking the permit to give everyone an opportunity.
Mr. Attorney?
Commissioner, if I may add to this, there is a provision in the CUP section that talks about automatic expiration of CUPs, but that is usually when a CUP has been obtained and the use has not commenced. My understanding of the case law and the approaches of other jurisdictions as well is that because CUPs generally grant some rights, that the proper way to address this too, instead of automatically assuming that it's revoked or expired or whatever, is to grant the public hearing, give them their due process, and formally revoke it. So that's the reason why we went with this approach.
Mr. Valenzuela?
Just one question directly to you on that. It's also my understanding that in cases such as this, where the CUP or the business has been allowed to continue for 15 years, that it could be assumed that the city has basically quasi-approved their existence by not taking the action 15 years ago. So it would take some kind of formal action for us to remove what was granted to them from them. Is that correct?
That is also another one of the concerns that makes it preferable to hold a public hearing and formally revoke it.
Mr. Edsel?
Yeah, on the findings, we don't have to make a finding on all 4, but just any one of the 4 is sufficient? Is that?
That's correct.
Okay. That's my understanding. Thank you.
Any other questions at
Yes,
this time? Mr. Hammonds?
we've approved a lot of CUPs with expiration dates. How is this business allowed to operate for 15 years with an expired conditional use permit? I mean, it seems like we just discovered,
Please, no applause.
seems like we just discovered last year that the CUP had expired.
Typically, the burden is placed on the operator to comply with the conditions of approval, and they're supposed to be monitoring their conditions of approval to ensure compliance. And so it would have been traditionally the responsibility of the operator to come in for the renewal of the conditional use permit. And upon doing analysis related to the violations on the property, current staff had realized that the CUP had expired and that the operator did not responsibly come in for request of an extension. And so that was also one of the additional items that led to the proliferation of all the violations and the sum of all the parts, with us now going forward with the public hearing, recommending that the Planning Commission revoke the conditional use permit.
So there's no calendar that the city keeps in terms of expiration dates on CUPs?
Not typically. And so on all other development permits, for example, on residential plan development permits, those typically expire unless the applicant requests an extension. We're not really in the business to monitor everyone's expiration dates and give them notice.
So they would just automatically expire then?
Yes. I will say that the current staff and the current practice is to monitor that much more closely than has been done in the past.
Okay.
So I think we've made significant improvements in that regard. We have a pending project list, and each project manager monitors their projects and their expiration dates, and we also publish it on our city's website and our monthly report. So the current staff is much more conscientious, but that's not to say that prior staff was deficient in any way. It really is the responsibility of the permit operator and owner to comply with their conditions of approval. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Director. That's it.
At this time, I'll open the public hearing. And,
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I had a couple of staff. I just wanted to get that one to the attorney while we're on his subject.
all right.
Just to be clear, and actually Sergeant France, you might be able to help me with this, the 100 to 200 calls for service, you're saying that those ones are directly related to this facility or to the people operating the facility?
Some of the people, some of those calls are, but others are of the other individuals right next to the facility that are associating there or hanging out or living near there. We never had any of those people or any of those types of activities there until this different group came in with this recycling center.
Do we know how many are directly related to the business versus how many? Because I went by there today and met some of the individuals there, and I can understand why some of those calls for service may exist. Do we know how many are directly related to the facility?
There's no way to give you a direct relation because there isn't an address for the center itself. It's in the parking lot.
Okay.
So it's anything in the general area. Usually the call comes out behind the Moose Lodge, behind Smart and Final.
Right.
But in order for us to give you an exact calls for service, we have to have an address dedicated to that spot.
I know there's also the 2 bars that empty out into the alley.
Right, but those bars usually aren't up and running till later. I mean, they're open during the day.
So these are
till
those
later
time
at
frames.
night, not during the day when all these other issues are there.
Okay, and just from your experience, though, you've seen that there's been a lot of them related directly to the facility. I mean, we can't give a specific number, but you've seen quite a few directly related to the facility.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I also had a question regarding how soon, if the conditional use permit is revoked, how soon would the occupants be required to vacate the facility? And what would be the process to make sure that that's actually removed, all of the connexes and everything?
I can answer that question, Commissioner. With respect to when the CUP is revoked, I reviewed the municipal code, and there is no firm date. But so my understanding and interpretation is that it becomes final after 10 days, unless there's an appeal, and it will be effective as of the effective date of the appeal if there is one. After that, then staff has the discretion to use code enforcement and other means to ensure that there's compliance with the revocation and to make sure that business is in compliance with the city code.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question I had specifically for this item for staff is the outdoor storage. I know we pointed a lot to the trash cans. Now, I visited a lot of the other recycling facilities that are of a similar nature, and I've noticed that all of them have trash cans. I mean, in front during business hours for sorting purposes, not necessarily for storage purposes, but so their clientele can sort between the green glass, the clear glass, the aluminum cans, the plastics, and so on. So are we really assigning the trash cans that are out in front as outdoor storage, or are we more concerned about the bags that were left in front of the facility at specific periods of time? Because I noticed in the report you mentioned the 15 to 20 storage facilities, but I don't know, I would classify those as storage facilities if they're being used as part of the business.
Well, I'll just start by answering that. It's really the sum of all the parts associated with the violation and all of the items that do not comply with the full and complete requirements of the CUP. So if, let's say for the sake of discussion, that the facility was immaculate and there was 3 or 4 empty trash cans out in front of the recycling collection area, we probably wouldn't have an issue. So I hope
It's
that
the whole.
It's the
okay.
sum of all the violations that we look in total, and we realize that there has been very little, if no progress whatsoever on trying to abate the violations. And then you couple that with the calls for service with the police department and the serious safety and public health and general welfare issues that we've been facing at this facility, and we have an expired CUP, and an operator that is not complying with the conditions of approval. So we felt like the best thing to do for the community and the city at large would be to propose revocation through this public hearing process.
And I do appreciate that. I just want to make sure that giving due process, we're not identifying things to be fact that is not fact. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're addressing, I have concerns as well, but I want to make sure we're addressing that from a proper legal perspective versus, you know, looking at it as a whole. Let's make sure we're looking at the proper items as a whole, not just things that other businesses would do.
Mr. Attorney.
I understand your concern as well. I believe the staff report had put in a heading about observations showing how the use is detrimental to the public health and safety, and I think staff rightfully identified the observations and the incidents that would lead them to that conclusion. But please also note that subsection 4 does talk about the use that is used in a way to constitute a public nuisance, and basically that's any use of property that would be detrimental to the public. And for example, by analogy, certain cities have public nuisance violations where someone leaves a home vacant for a certain amount of time, which leads to break-ins and vagrants and things of that nature, and that's considered public nuisance. And I think the conditions that have been identified here, even though it might not be clearly attributable to this owner, I think there is enough to show that it's the property and the use is not being maintained in a way that does not constitute a public nuisance.
Yeah, item four is a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I've noticed in the evenings when I've gone by there, everything is contained within those containers, and the site is pretty clean. But during the daytime, there are those bags out in front. Any other questions? If not, I will open the public hearing at this time and ask for Pogos Martinian to address the commission.
Good evening. My name is Pogos Martinian. I'm one of the owners of the recycling center. And I wanted to start off with first presenting that the presentation that was just showed about the recycling center. It was not entirely true. One of the things when we actually took over the recycling center 4 years ago, the CUP had already expired 11 years. When we took the place, there was the homeless people, they were already there. They had been there for many years. When we called the police to have the homeless removed, because they were also giving us problems, their response was they're at a no man's land. I guess that specific spot in the corner belongs to an individual that no one knows who the owner is. And they're not, since it's a private property, they're not able to actually remove them. Since the owner of the property is not complaining. And the bags that we have, that you just saw in the picture, the picture that had 15 bags piled up, the only time we have 15 bags piled up is when we're actually changing containers, because when one of the containers gets full, we have to, we have to clean it, put it aside since the container is full. When the truck comes to pick up the container, so we can so we can put the material inside. So I guess the times when they took the pictures is when we were changing containers. And the signs they had on the container where it had open, that is not a container that we use on a daily basis. Since we do change our containers every 2 days, every day, every 3 days, another recycling center might have used it. When they dump it, then they bring it to our center. So it's always in a circle. But when we do see any graffiti on the container from the excuse me, from the exterior, we do have paint where we make sure there's no graffiti on it. And the gentleman that was working at the recycling center, he was not the manager. He's just a regular employee. Whatever he did, this is not something that we approve, or whatever he's being alleged to have done, this is not something that we approve. We went ahead and definitely removed them, and we have another gentleman working at the site currently. There is no drinking on the site. None of the employees drink, nor we hire any homeless individuals at the center. And I know the police officer just mentioned that we are also buying materials that other centers are not. we are not buying any other materials because we're not allowed to buy any materials. We don't have, I mean, I want to know what material is it that we're buying?
I didn't say you were buying them. What I said is you had them there. You have a material called commingle, which is a combination of different types of plastics that they don't take here. They only take in Los Angeles County. I don't know whether you're buying them or not, but you are collecting them there.
Commingle is a mix of different materials. For example, anything that is not a CRV and it belongs to the same number. For example, that water that you're drinking, that's #1 plastic. Since that's CRV, when you have a non-CRV with the same plastic, that's called commingled. It is allowed by the state. We do not buy commingle. That was abandoned about 1 year ago. Before, all of the recycling centers that were buying, but the state came out with a law where we're not allowed to buy commingle, and we're not because we are a state-funded program. If I were to buy commingle, first of all, I'd be in violation with the state. Second of all, I wouldn't be able to sell it. There's no way for me to sell it.
Yeah, I never said you were buying it. I just know that when I went there before and talked to them, a lot of the bags that were stuffed up there were commingle, and they didn't have a place to store them inside the other containers that had aluminum and glass. That's why it was kept off to the side.
When you say commingle, what would you
Just a moment.
consider?
Point of order, Chairman Davis.
Yeah.
Could we please explain that this isn't a time for back and forth dialogue, but it's a time for the property owner or business owner to present whatever they would like to as part of the public hearing?
Please continue.
And the police, we have called the police ourselves many times since we were instructed by the city if we see anything done in violation with the homeless people or just in general that's causing problems for the recycling center. Myself, my partner, and the employees at the recycling center have called the police probably more than 20 or 30 times. I myself, I have helped the police department with the city collecting the trash that the homeless have left in the corner, collecting the shopping carts. I mean, we have done everything to work with the city and the police department because, believe me, having the homeless there has caused a lot of trouble for us. And we stopped buying material from the homeless people so to try a method to have them not to have them not come by the recycling center anymore.
Anything else?
I mean,
how often are you on the site?
huh?
How often are you on site?
Every 2 weeks, every month, it depends. I mean, I come on Saturdays, I work so I can see the customers, see how the center is. Especially within this last, I want to say 6 months, I have been coming every other Saturday and working. Because I want to see the situation, how clean it is, and it is very clean. Maybe when we get busy, at that specific time, you might see some caps on the floor, some bottles. But once the customers leave, we have 2 people that are just constantly cleaning, and we're not leaving any materials after work time. And the sign that you saw, we have a normal nice sign printed. It's not on the container. I mean, we have been doing this for the last 4.5 years at this center. I mean, the customers love us, the neighbors love us. We do a good job. We pay cash, and I mean, we pay one of the highest prices in the city. I mean, if we were to be removed from this site, there would only be one other recycling center that's currently operating and be a monopoly.
Any questions of Mr.
Yes, Mr.
Martignan?
Question. Staff stated earlier that when they have contacted you regarding violations, within a couple days, the violations start recurring again. Is that lack of management? I was unclear as to how often you were there, but it seems like violations are corrected immediately, but then the staff goes back a few days later and the violations occur again. That's happened a number of times.
I have met with the city, went over the violations with them. One of them was the tarp, so I made sure the tarp was removed. It was clean. They had issues with a specific worker. I guess after work, he was also hanging out with the homeless, so we made sure that he was removed. He was not one of the help anymore. I have, and the other problem was the cleanness. So we made sure it was always clean. The lady at the city, I mean, she would always call me. Like I said, I would participate in cleaning the shopping center, cleaning the shopping carts. We have only received one violation by mail. That is the only time. And it was to my understanding, since the last conversation I had, everything was okay. So I was caught by surprise when I received the letter.
I had a chance to drive by the facility yesterday, and the tarp was there.
The tarp or the umbrella?
No, it was a blue tarp.
I haven't seen it.
Any other questions at this time?
I do.
Mr. Valenzuela.
Do you want to go?
You go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions for you. First of all, how long are the employees normally on shift for?
8 to 5.
8 to 5. Where do they go to the restroom?
They either go to the bar, the restaurant, or the FedEx.
The bar's not open most of the time.
They're open during the day.
Okay, so they're just using other facilities? They're not urinating?
They're not urinating on the floor, no.
As far as you know, okay. As far as the homeless individuals, it's your assertion that they're not friends with the homeless people?
I'm 100% they're not friends.
Okay. I was just there this evening, and I was talking with two individuals. The first individual who lives in that homeless encampment said that, I said, do you know the people who work there? And he goes, yeah, they're good friends of ours. The second individual that came up said he just came from the manager's home. So I have concern regarding that. I have a question regarding the storage outside. You said that sometimes you can't store it all, you have to wait for the bins. Is there a reason why you weren't stopping collecting when you realized you couldn't contain it within your container?
To answer your first question, the gentleman that currently works at the center, he lives in San Fernando Valley, is an older guy. I would guarantee you that that is a lie. And the homeless people over there, they do have a tendency to lie.
Okay.
They do. And the second answer is the containers, they get full, and it does not take us hours to change the containers. It's usually a matter of minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. You don't really realize that it's already full. Or you already have piles of material, and we don't buy piles of material and stack them up on top of each other and just leave it. It's usually inside the container. The time that we have 15 or 20 is when we're removing one type of material and just putting another type, so the container could go full with a specific one type of material. So if it's number 2 or number 1. We would store them together sometimes so it's not outside. And when the container comes in, we would put back the number 1s and then bring the number 2s out for the container for them to exchange the container and then put everything back inside.
You understand that by separating it out and leaving it outside, though, that would be a condition of a violation of the conditional use permit, a willful violation.
We're not, again, it's storing if you leave it for a day or even for an hour, but we're only exchanging it for them to remove the container. I mean, it's part of the business.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had two other ones. One is how do you handle containers when people show up with containers that have liquid in them? What is your process for handling those containers?
We have a bucket where we have the liquids dumped in the bucket.
What do you do with the bucket at the end of the night?
Before, there was a storage space where we would actually dump it in there. And then the city official, when she came in, she had told us to stop because she was not sure if we were able to dump it in there or not. And then she was supposed to check on it and then let us know. So for the meantime, we're actually take it home, the employee would actually take it home and dump it in the sewer.
Okay, and then the only other question I had is you'd mentioned that you had only received one violation by mail. Isn't it correct that you had asked the city to stop sending you violations by mail and to contact you?
No, I didn't tell them to stop sending me violations. I had told them when there's an issue, if you call me directly, I can, before it takes 10 or 15 days for us to receive the letter, I can fix the problem right away.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from Mr. Lusk?
Yeah, and when you purchased this operation, the CUP had expired 11 years earlier. When you found out you had purchased something without a CUP, what did you do to try to rectify it?
We didn't purchase the location.
Purchase the business.
I don't understand.
We didn't purchase the business. They lost the lease, the owner of the business, and we were able to get a new lease.
The lease has nothing to do with the CUP. Am I on track here? Or I don't understand when you found out there was a really serious 11-year lapse. Why didn't you go and try to rectify that with the city?
We recently found out about the 11-year expiration of the CUP. I did go to the city. I talked to the city to for us to get a new CUP. We do have plans. We drew up plans. We sent them the plans for them to approve it. There are some issues, and we're still currently working on the plans to submit it to the city.
So am I correct to say, at least at this point, nothing really has been accomplished?
So far, no.
Just to clarify, you did not purchase this from the prior owners. There was a vacated piece of property that you kind of moved into after they stopped operating?
That's correct.
So there was no, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next card I have is from Mary Fox.
Good evening. One thing.
Pull the microphone down. We can hear you better. Pull the microphone down. It'll come down. There you go.
Okay. For the gentleman over here, you spoke to the homeless man that lives out by the recycling, and he said that the workers were his friends. I'm his best friend, I think. His name is David, and I wave to him when I recycle, and he thinks we're best buds, so that may be why he thinks the recycling people are also his friends. I recycled yesterday, and there is a blue umbrella that is up there. It may look like a tarp from far away, but when you're standing up under the recycling area, it is a freestanding blue umbrella, which I appreciate because it gets hot out there. But what I would like to say is I'm a volunteer at the Moose Family Center, which is right by the recycling center. We recycle every Tuesday and Friday. We recycle approximately 800 pounds of glass, plastic, and aluminum every month. We use all of our recycling money to fund our children and family functions, our Christmas parties, our Halloween parties, Easter parties. We're very fortunate, we feel, to have this recycling center there. I feel safe on the 2 days a week that I go there. There is trash and things around in the homeless area, and I'm assuming that some of the people are peeing out there too. I've never seen anything at the recycling center that I would ever be fearful of. We walk those 800 pounds of recycling twice a week over from the Moose Lodge over to the recycling area. We're all volunteers. I brought a whole bunch of us here. If we had to take those 800 pounds a month of recycling materials, put it in my little Honda, and drive it to some other facility, it would be a real hardship. I am retired, fixed income. Gas is a little bit cheaper now than what it used to be, but we feel we're very fortunate to have that area there. I feel that I've seen a lot of things up here, a lot of violations. When I'm there, I've seen the big plastic things that we're calling storage, but I see them pull them out, set them down to get ready to put it in a bin. I don't see them sitting out there all day. I don't see them sitting out overnight. And I personally feel that we're all looking at the homeless people and what they do there. But if that's the problem, then let's take care of that. Now, I have heard from some of the men that live out there that they've been given citations over the past couple of years and that they have to move. Some do move on. A couple of them don't. I don't know why. Now, I just heard the gentleman say that it's private property, so nothing can be done. I don't know if something can be done. If they are given citations, if that's legal and they have to move, then why isn't that taken care of? Why isn't that immediate problem taken care of and let our recycling center stay there? And
So basically, you're in favor of retaining the operation there?
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Any questions, Ms. Fox? Thank you. Next card I have is Ron Vang.
Excuse me. How are you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Being one of the roofless people, not homeless, thank you. I am one of the individuals that does stay back there. The last individual that does stay back there. Because 4 years ago, you were telling people that they could live back there. That was the homeless shelter. You have not built or opened a homeless shelter for the homeless. Your idea to help us is to send us someplace else. Ventura, Oxnard, Simi Valley, San Diego. Deputy Preciado, I've had numerous contact with him, okay, and I've spoken with him also. But they shut down two shelters in Ventura, one in Oxnard, okay? That's just one aspect. The recycling center is my ATM, okay? I push a cart and recycle 20 hours a day. You walk with me one day, any of you, I guarantee you, you'll be a lot healthier tomorrow, or tired and sleepy. Now, I work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't do drugs. I'm not an individual that causes turmoil. Okay, I don't urinate in my area, but I'm the last person standing. And yes, I did see you, sir, today. We spoke, you smiled, I smiled too, okay? If you shut this place down, it's a long walk to Adolfo or to Vaughn's. The only other place that you have a recycling center is Oxnard. I don't drive. That's a heck of a walk. Okay, this is the only place. The center itself, we've cleaned it up. We've cleaned up that little alley they're talking about. I personally have gone back there and cleaned it up. When the wind blows, stuff blows down, and it's not from the recycling center. You also have 4 stores and 2 bars in all kinds of places that just litter blows down. I make sure the place is clean as best as I can. They do a very good job of cleaning it up too. They don't leave any of those out. There is no tarp. You didn't see a tarp. The only thing you've seen is an umbrella. There's no tarp. Everything's put inside at night. Okay, it's kept clean. And that's just by my own observation, being that I'm the one that walks around there daily. I'm the face that everybody sees, unfortunately. God bless you all, or God bless everybody else. But I mean, they get to see my ugly little face walking around constantly. So they haven't done anything wrong. Some of that stuff that's leaking down isn't from the recycling center. Okay, it's coming down from the backside. I'm not going to say. Okay, it's coming from other places. All right, that put stuff out and it seeps down into the drainage ditch and runs right through because the recycling center happens to be right there. And runs through. It's not from them. They have a bucket that they keep the stuff clean. Everything's clean. Nobody urinates there anymore. They use the restrooms. All right? But if you shut it down, where's the rest of the people to recycle? Where are we supposed to go? We don't have a vehicle. Okay? She has a lot of recyclables from the Moose, and they do it for the children of the Moose. And they're a great corporation. Unfortunately, the one individual that's back there is mentally challenged. We'll go with that way. He has a hard time. And that's all we can say with that. Still a great guy. Still fantastic. But if you shut it down, where are we supposed to take our recyclables for those that don't have a vehicle to take them?
Any questions of Mr. Vang? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, County.
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to address the commission?
Mr. Davis, I did put in a card, and I don't know if you received it, but I did put a card in for this. I do want to speak on the subject. For the record, there are no council members here. You know, this is very troubling coming from this city. You know, you had Habitat for Humanity who didn't have a license. Okay, the contractors board, they shouldn't have been performing work here. The city was aware of it.
Mr. Lorimer, keep it to this discussion of the conditional use permit, please.
Mr. Davis, let me finish my point.
No,
this is a public comment. I'm trying to make a point here.
The subject is the conditional use permit.
I understand, sir, but let me finish my comments. I'd appreciate it, sir.
If you'll address the issue.
I appreciate it, sir. Let me finish. Again, we have 15 years of them operating a business. And again, it goes back to, is the city basically maintaining the city? Now, let me go into this subject matter. We have a business, obviously, that has problems, okay? I know for a fact there's a school that used to go over there to bring the recyclables, Mr. Davis. And I can tell you this much. Not only was it unsafe and people were acting inappropriate, but it's an issue. Your police department here is hired by the city of Camarillo. They've obviously made some key points here. And as a city with crime is up 18% and assaults are up 33%, they're taking time away from other issues that are important. Let me get back to the subject matter. This issue of having this business here, there's no excuse for it. They're not following the law. It's your job, okay, to revoke this permit. What we've seen going on here is not acceptable. This is not the San Fernando Valley. It's been going on. It's not correct. It's not right. You've had plenty of testimony. When he was asked to come up here, he made several comments. He went to the city. He didn't specifically say who he talked to. He didn't go to the city council. Okay? He made no efforts. We didn't see any documentation to prove that he made any effort to clean up this mess and to blight on the city of Camarillo. You, as elected officials or appointed, should take very seriously what the police department has said and other individuals that find this place to be unacceptable. So I urge you as officials to follow through and close this facility down. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Lorimer? No. Thank you again. Is there anybody else who wants to address the commission at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing and ask for commission discussion and recommendation. Start with Mr. Valenzuela.
Trying to formulate exactly how I want to state this. Let me start with a few things. I do appreciate Ron coming out and everything he does to try to keep that area clean. I did go visit the encampment back behind that area, and I can honestly say that probably, I don't know, 70–80% of the items listed in our agenda is probably not necessarily related to the recycling facility as it is related to the encampment behind the facility. What I will say, though, is that there are some concerning facts. One, there's actually a lot in our report that I actually find concerning that I believe it's misstated a lot in our report here. But the one that's misstated in our report that is most concerning to me is the line on March 1st, 2012, Karen and Pogos Meridian, hopefully I said that right, purchased the recycling facility and operated the business. What we heard tonight is that they didn't purchase it, which in my mind means that the conditional use permit had expired due to abandonment and that there was no actual transfer through any legal means from one business to another of any operations that would have been covered by the conditional use permit. In my mind, that actually falls under the abandonment clause, that it was abandoned because they lost their lease as mobile recycling, which means there is no operational permit for them to be operating in the first place. some other things that were concerning.
Just a second,
Sure.
Ms. Fonzo. We have a response from the staff.
So I just want to respond quickly to it. We actually have a signed document stating that they did accept the conditions of approval
That
on March 1st, 2012.
that they accepted it, but not that they purchased the business. They accepted,
They accepted the conditions of approval and agreed to abide by them.
but they didn't purchase the business, correct?
I don't know if that's a fact or not. In their file, dating back, it says that they purchased the business.
Because they technically would have to, and I guess this goes back to Mr. Hemming's comment, which is actually very concerning to me, that we didn't even know that this wasn't operating. If they agreed to the conditions, why didn't we realize that it was expired back in 2012? That is very concerning to me. So I've actually got a lot of heartache over this issue. Is there any other comments from staff before I keep going on that? The other issue is that we're not, I mean, we can't really, unfortunately, attribute all the 100 to 200 calls of service. I will take the sergeant's word that, you know, he's aware that, you know, some of these are definitely related to it, and the fact that these started coming in 4 years ago, which is the time of operation, which would lead to a public safety issue in my mind. But some of these things I kind of had to throw out of the report as far as concerns related specifically to the business. It wasn't just, I know the one lady had mentioned David as the one individual. There's another individual who did not want his name used, and he does not have any mental illnesses that I'm aware of, and he was the one who specifically stated he'd come from the manager, or from someone who ran the business's home. So that's, to me, a reliable source that there is some association between those individuals and the individuals who are running the recycling center. The issue regarding recycling in Camarillo, we actually did approve a conditional use permit. There is another recycling facility off of Flynn Road. So this would not be the last recycling facility in Camarillo. And there, I've used them. It's pretty easy to go into, less than, what, mile away, half a mile away, mile away. And then the last thing that I want to bring up, because I have a lot of things, but I'm going to kind of leave it at this, is that I do believe that there are willful violations. You know, the fact that they are leaving out bags of trash because they don't want to associate one with the other. I know the other recycling facility, when they took product in, they would tell you at one point, we're done, we can't accept any more glass, or we can't accept any more of this, and they would shut down operations. To continue to accept them or to not store them inside because you don't want to mix them is a willful violation, in my mind, of the conditional use permit. And I think there's other willful violations as well. I have a hard time believing someone's driving home. I mean, maybe it's happening, but I have a hard time believing someone's driving home with a bucket full of slush in their car to go dump in their toilet, not necessarily down the storm drain out in front of their house, but down their toilet or sink into our sewer system. I don't necessarily believe that that they're actually handling the business in a manner that would protect the public's health and the public safety.
Thank you. Mr. Lusk, you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have that much detail to go through. It's just very clear to me that this is not a legally operating business. They do not have a CUP. They have not responded. I don't know what to say. This is kind of a slam dunk. It's just, I'm for the staff's recommendations.
Mr.
Yes,
Edsel.
Mr. Moe, could you put those findings back up on the screen? Yeah, I think pretty simply, I think the testimony was sufficient for me to have a finding on number 3 and number 4 for certain. And so based on those two findings, I'd be in favor of shutting it down.
Mr. Hemmons?
As our director stated earlier, it's the sum of all the parts, and also the fact that when the owner was either notified by letter or in person that there were violations, obviously the violations were corrected right away. They have a business they're operating, but then within a few days the violations started occurring again. So whether it's lack of management or just lack of concern for any of the conditions of the approval of the CUP, which really isn't there. I've heard enough evidence tonight to convince me that it should not be an operating business at that site.
Mr. Vaca, I have a couple of questions. One is, if the permit is revoked, that does not prevent another applicant to come in and make an application in this area, correct?
That's correct.
And would it be appropriate as part of the motion to establish a time period for them to be off the premises, 15 days, 30 days, something like that?
Based on what I'm hearing from the planning commissioners during commission comment, I think it would be appropriate to enhance the findings as presented to you in the draft resolution for your consideration of revocation, specifically finding E, to include that if it's the direction of the planning commission that they are finding that the property is a public nuisance, and we could include that language within finding E, then we would be able to use our existing municipal code property maintenance and public nuisance abatement requirements to ensure that the use is adequately abated.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No. If not, do I have a recommendation from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we revoke conditional use permit number 164 as approved on April 2nd, 1996 as reasons of violations to numbers 3, 4, and 5. Corrections 2, 3, and 4 inclusively.
Does that motion include to add the language so as to constitute a public nuisance at the end of finding E?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the specific wording on number 4.
I know, but
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second by Mr. Hemmons. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
I do have a quick
Mr.
question.
Lusk.
I understand that the staff was going to look at enhancing the I guess this list. Is that what I understand?
yes, so the motion includes adding to finding E so as to constitute a public nuisance, and then also Assistant City Attorney Kane would like to also comment.
And that should be in the motion, right?
Yes. Mr. Kane.
I believe the motion as proposed right now is a motion to approve this resolution revoking this conditional use permit based on the findings of subsection 2, 3, and 4. So that there was a voluntary abandonment, that there have been violations of the conditions of approval, and also that the use for which this approval was granted is now exercised in a manner that is detrimental to public health, safety, and as mentioned by the director, in a manner that constitutes a public nuisance. And I think that is the motion that is before the commission right now.
That
And I'll
sounds good.
second that motion.
We have a second from Mr. Edsel. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. That motion passes 5-0. So this action would be final with the commission unless appealed within 10 days?